Hello, Nacita School community. This is Tanya Kedlowski. I am live today with our third of three Facebook Live sessions, and they are all around the budget and our how we got to the budget that we finalized this month, and sharing information that contributed to the development of that budget as well as the impact to taxpayers. So today is three of three. There will be a four because I added some things regarding the tax bill so you could actually see things and I could show you a few things on there. So it'll be a little bit longer with one more session added. Where we ended last time was around the valuation slide, which includes information that records sort of the property values around our school district. So each municipality, we have 7 municipalities in our school district. Each of those municipalities contribute to the total property value of the school district. That property value is one of the pieces of the puzzle when it comes to the decisions with how much money the school can generate by property taxpayers. Generally speaking, the wealthier your property is in your school district, or the more wealth you have in your school district, the more money your property taxpayers are required by law to contribute to the total tax levy of the school district. And so the wealthier your district, the decrease in the mill rate, because you have more property wealth. Just because you have more property wealth does not mean you have increased money to the school, because remember, again, our school is capped. We have a revenue limit every single year. Here's the limit you have to fall under as you create your budget. So as that number is set, as you increase wealth, that burden of that levy is dispersed between more property. So if a new house comes in, the village of Nacita, and the village of Nacita typically has a certain portion, I think it's about 4% of our tax levy, that individual tax owner is going to pick up some of that additional amount that's levied to the village of Nacita. So other people's, depending on the percentage they get and if the school district is taking in more or less money, theoretically speaking, the people of that village would have lower taxes because there's more property wealth. And this is why the business base, if a business is a taxing entity, that business base of industry becomes important because they pick up some of the portion of that tax levy because of their property wealth, and it takes away some of that burden from other people, residential owners, again, if that business is actually a tax paying entity. So this is our increase for this year. We're looking at just over a 10% increase in our school district in terms of property wealth. As you can see, over the last few years, the increases have been fairly significant. For example, in 23-24, when our increase was 23.8%, the state average increase was about 14, if I recall correctly. So it just shows the difference in that the state increase versus our own school district increase. So let's see how that kind of plays out. As we're looking at the property values, you can see where our district is in the blue and the state is in the red. And if you look over time, you can see kind of the differences in where those tax rates have gone. And that's basically the dollars per $1,000 of equalized value. So when you look at our tax rate, again, the dollars per thousand of value, you will see that Nacita, our taxpayers have been below the state average. At one point right here, and in this bump, we were above the state average. But right at this point, for the last several years now, our rate per thousand is below the state average. Now, please keep in mind, I'm only talking about the school district right now. So in your overall tax bill, it encompasses many other things besides the school district, the public school. But the public school wise, this is only public school data. So you can see how we fared in terms of the average around the state. So the third piece, again, now we had three pieces to what is considered part of the revenue limit. And again, revenue limit is the amount of money authorized for a school to bring in. So every school district is by law capped at a certain money amount that we can bring in every year, and we need to balance our budget around that particular cap. And so right now, we have the third piece of it. It's enrollment, equalized value, and shared costs. So shared costs, you can see that over the course of the last biennium budget, where this purple line goes up, you will see that that is the biennium budget of which the state gave an increase of per member revenue. So Necedah was one of several districts in our state that were capped at the low revenue ceiling limit of $10,000 per member or per student. We were part of the lowest group, and this last biennium, our legislature raised that low amount to get closer to the gaps that needed to be filled between some of the higher districts and the lower districts. So you can see right here on this red blocks on the bottom left here, this is probably different at this point. It's probably higher than this, but you can see the discrepancy, generally speaking. Now, there's not many districts that are getting $32,000 per member, but it does exist. But the lower districts, or the lowest districts around our state, are getting $11,325, which again is Necedah. And the state average is $11,518. So in this biennium budget where this purple line went up, all of these districts that were low at getting $10,000 per student, as Necedah was, were able to increase their per member revenue by $1,325. So that jump was a significant piece because we haven't had that jump for quite some time. So when you look at this difference here, you can see that the legislature is trying to close the gaps between the highest paid revenue per member districts and then, of course, the lowest revenue per member districts. So if we even received the state average, we would have an additional $361,000, almost $362,000, which you can see right here. So when we think about that and we think about the gaps between funding between districts, there is certainly an inequity that remains, even though there was significant attempts to begin to narrow that gap of the per revenue limit per member. So this right here shows kind of this idea of 2/3 funding, because the idea way back was that the state, the equalization aid we get, which is state aid, was going to be 3/4 of that revenue limit, and taxpayers were going to pick up the other portion. In our particular district, because of our property wealth, you can see that in 2008, we were receiving 65% of our cap, our revenue cap, was coming from state aid. And the rest, to get to the 100%, was coming from property taxpayers in our school district. Today, you can see it's almost inverted, and we are only getting 33% state aid, and our property taxpayers are paying the additional 67%. So it is an absolute difference between 2008 and 2025 with the portion of taxes our taxpayers have to pay as part of that total revenue limit cap that's calculated every year through the biennium budget, so it's state law. That cap is being funded primarily by our property taxpayers. And that's all determined in a state calculation, and it's determined based on the percentage of property wealth in a school district. Because remember, I said in a couple slides ago, the higher your property wealth, the lower your state aid is in the total cap that we're authorized to bring in for revenue. So as you can see with the things that I just shared, we certainly have that calculation, that formula. It doesn't work for all districts, and Necedah is a prime example of that. So what has resulted now are school referenda, and in just this past month, we had over $4 billion of new funding in the state of Wisconsin through school referenda. So when you think about that, that is how we're funding schools. We are not running it through the state. We are running it through referenda in our state through individual municipal school referenda elections. And the unfortunate part about that is it creates significant divisiveness within communities, and the narratives that come out of all of that are very unfortunate, because it's pinning taxpayers against taxpayers depending on your level of support of schools. And it is a very sad thing to watch happen when just a few years back our taxpayers would have never have had to do that. So it is the way of the world right now, and that is the way Wisconsin has chosen to go about funding public schools. Right now you can look at the state budget, the total state budget, and about 32% of the state budget is funding K-12 schools. The other piece of this puzzle that is unfortunate, and what I will continue to advocate for, is that property wealth in our district does not represent the demographics of our school community. We live in a community and communities, municipalities, that have many retirees. There are people on fixed incomes. We have high numbers, 70% of our families that have children in school here are in the lower socioeconomic level, qualifying their students for free and reduced lunch. That is an equation that's put into many funding sources to determine how additional grant funds and things can be given out. So I will continue to advocate for that in that formula that I think is broken, or in that calculation our legislators use. We should have some type of a condition in there that offsets the required property tax contribution by our taxpayers, and it needs to have some type of threshold based on either one, the fixed income of that community, or two, the high the low socioeconomic demographic within our community. Throughout the time in the last decade or so, there has been a lot of conversation at the state level about adding some additional revenue per student in a district that has high poverty. So certainly that's one example of what I'm talking about. I don't think that has been spoken about in some time, but at least it's an example of kind of the advocacy we need to have a consideration for how we bring revenue to our district without increasing taxes for our property taxpayers. Here's where I'm going to end today. This is a depiction of our operational referenda from 2018. and then again in 2022. We've passed 2 operational referenda in our district to be able to support operational expenses to maintain programming for our students. So this is the mill rates around these timelines. So as you can see in 1819, our mill rate, our actual mill rate was $9.21. You can see that right here. And when we put the ballot out communicating the facts around the referendum, we were projecting a $9.84. So, and then on the far right here, you can see the state average is $9.46. So we outperformed in this year, for example, what we had projected, and we outperformed the average state mill rate. So as you can go down the list here and just kind of see where things are at in terms of where we are today versus where we were in 1819. This year, our final budget produced a $6.20 mill rate. Again, that's cost per thousand of assessed value. So it gives you an idea. Again, this is average because this is all based on the municipality's portion of taxes off our final capped levy versus individual assessed values within each of those municipalities. So when I join you on Friday, I am going to share with you a tax bill, and we're going to go through all of that, and I'll show you how things kind of work in that regard. And we'll talk a little bit about the bond referendum we passed in 23 and why it has not increased our taxpayers' taxes. I'll share a little bit of that information with you to help you understand that. So thank you, everybody. I will see you again here in a couple days. Have a good rest of the day.